Hey everyone, this is Jay, and welcome to my May reading wrap-up. I'm not gonna lie, this month was really busy for me. I had a ton of stuff going on at work that would include things that would require me to stay late. And then I also had my birthday, and my parents came to visit, so I had to hang out with them for a couple days, which wasn't bad. I'm not saying like, oh no, I hung out with my parents, but I didn't do a lot of reading when they were over because they were staying in my house. Honestly, that wasn't that terrible though, because I ended up being a lot pickier with the books that I read, so I had a lot of DNFs, but as a result, a lot of the books that I did see all the way through were really good and I really enjoyed them, so quality over quantity. I want to apologize if you can hear my cat in the background. For some reason, he has decided that he's going to be fed 2 hours early today. He's not, but he's willing to argue about it. It's not dinner time yet. Explanations over, on to the books. The first book that I finished in May was Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett, the second book in the Emily Wilde series. This cozy fantasy series is about an academic studying fairies, getting into various shenanigans as she learns more about fairies during the course of her studies. This is a sequel, and it pretty much exactly captures the same vibes and tones as the first book. It is remarkably consistent. Once again, this was a delightful read. It was very lighthearted, even though this installment to the series truly upped the stakes to a degree I wasn't expecting for the second book in a series. It does make me wonder, though, if this was only ever meant to be a trilogy, because I don't really see how they're going to be able to up the stakes again after this storyline concludes. Not the storyline of the second book, that is, but the storyline introduced in the second book. This book also introduced a lot more depth to the world and new characters than the first one did, but it does it in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming. Instead, it feels very additive to the first book in a very harmonious way. My love for the characters, especially Emily and Wendell, really just grew with its installment, and I am just as excited for the third one as I was for the second one. So I'm really excited about the consistency that Heather Fawcett is showing across this entire body of work. I was truly delighted by this book, and I ended up giving it 4 stars, just like the first one. I know that the cover for the third book has been revealed, so I'm hoping that it's going to be released soon. There might be a release date. To be honest, I have not checked, so I don't know, but I'm hoping that it will be soon regardless. After that, I picked up The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. The Obstacle is the Way is a self-help book preaching that we need to reframe obstacles and bad things in our lives in constructive ways so that we can continue past them and grow from them. And holy fuck, I hated this book so much. This book had no nuance whatsoever. Pretty much every scenario in this book is presented as black or white with little to no consideration for context. Absolutely no shades of gray acknowledged whatsoever. The narrative seems to push that no matter what the issue is, whether it be minor or as major as false imprisonment, should quickly be reframed as a position that you can grow from. What? You cannot tell me that like an uncomfortable water cooler conversation at work is equitable to false imprisonment for triple homicide. People are not automatons, and reframing your problems is not going to miraculously solve the problems. Yes, I do realize that the message he is trying to impart is to not get so swept into an obstacle to the point where you can't escape or grow from it, but my issue is less with the message itself and more how he frames it. Holiday simplifies his message so much that the reader is expected to go from obstacle to over it immediately, which is just not helpful, and it's something particularly damning for a self-help book. The book is also extremely repetitive. It's broken into parts comprised of, let's say, 10 to 20, 3 to 5 page chapters. Honestly, I could only make it through the first part of around 10 chapters, and I shit you not, they were all exactly the same. Each chapter starts with an account of a successful person allegedly embodying the message as evidence of the accuracy of Holiday's claims. The logic being, since a successful person faced hardship, therefore his argument is correct, with no other evidence. Ignore the questionable sample size, the fact that he's only choosing successful, like famously successful people, and just cherry-picked bullshit. This book was just absolute garbage, and is my first 1 star of the year. The truth is I only picked this one up because the company I work for decided to do a professional book club and provided the book for free. So I was like, what the heck, why not? Opportunity for professional growth. Talk about a lie. I fell for the free book gimmick, and oh god, did I suffer for it. After that was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This literary fiction novel recounts the events leading up to a house fire that ravages the suburban house of an affluent American family. The takeaway I got from this book was that I need to stop picking up family dramas. This one was a big ol' snooze fest for me. I just don't really care about suburban families or the drama in their lives. It just feels so mundane and small to me. I don't care. The characters always tend to feel the same, and I always feel like I've read them before and didn't really like them the first time either. I understand that they're supposed to be super nuanced character studies, but the truth is I have very low tolerance for petty drama and bullshit in my personal life, and even less tolerance for it in my fiction, so oftentimes the storylines just don't really appeal to me. This was a pretty easy DNF at around 26% or so. After that, I finished Storm of Locusts by Rebecca Roanhorse, the second book in the Sixth World series. The Sixth World series is about a DNA monster hunter forced to fight when world-threatening problems are brought to her door in a magical post-apocalyptic world. Mainly, the series is kind of an episode of the week, good time series. You're not really going to come across anything that's going to question your worldview or change your life, but man, is it fun. These books are very action and plot focused, but they do a pretty good job of having significant character moments as well, considering that it's mostly about the plot. Similarly to Emily Wilde, this is also a very consistent follow-up novel. It's not really anything like Emily Wilde outside of that. It managed to maintain the same voice and tone from the first book, while also accommodating the growth from the first novel, so the characters did maintain and continue to change from that first novel rather than, flushing it all down the toilet and starting from scratch, which I have seen in other series. In this book, the cast was expanded once again, but all of the new additions were a delight to read and really added to the strength of the story. One thing about the action-packed plot was that the pace is so breakneck in these books. It is to the point I kind of wish there was more of a pause at times to take a breather. For the most part, it suited the story, but the ending, just like the first one, felt quite a bit rushed. In the case of this book, not so much with the final battle as the last stretch of preparation before it. I gave this one a 3.5 stars. One thing I think you should be aware of, though, if you do want to try to read the series, is that there is a third book listed on Goodreads, but it doesn't really seem like Roanhorse actually has any plans to write it. So there's a pretty good chance that there will never have a third book come out, even though the second book does heavily hint that there will be a third book. So if you're okay with that, it does have its own ending, but if you're okay with kind of the series ending so nebulously, then I would definitely recommend this just for a good time. The next book was Most Ardently by Gabe Cole Novoa. Most Ardently is a young adult Pride and Prejudice retelling from the perspective of if Elizabeth Bennett was a trans boy named Oliver. This one hurt me a lot because I wanted to love it so badly. I thought the cover was absolutely stunning, and I loved the idea of Pride and Prejudice with Elizabeth as a trans boy. I thought that was an extremely interesting premise, and I was really excited to get started. Unfortunately for me, in the end, it was just too young for me, and I couldn't get past it. When I initially saw it, I was so blinded by how beautiful the cover was, I totally missed that it was categorized as YA. And I do really think that there is truly nothing wrong with the book. I just didn't resonate with the themes that are commonly focused on in YA books, and this one was no different. The characters are aged down to teenagers, and I couldn't fully relate to them because of it. Probably just too much of an old fogey. Because of that, I ended up DNFing at around 24%. The next book for me this month was Age of Death by Michael J. Sullivan, the fifth book in the Legends of the First Empire series. This series covers the inception of civilization in Sullivan's fantasy world of Rhaeria, specifically in an attempt to show how legends morph and change over time when connected to his other series, the Rhaeria Revelations. As I haven't actually read the Rhaeria Revelations, I can't speak to how accurate that last bit is, but I can say that this series is quite good. Once again, this penultimate installment to the series continues to ramp up the stakes somehow. I wasn't really sure how it was going to do it, but it's doing it. It's definitely doing it. There are a lot of reveals in this book, but even more questions come up from those reveals. The last book will have to be absolutely bonkers to match the pace set up by the fourth and fifth books, and I legitimately have no idea how Sullivan is going to do it. To be honest, this book covers very little time and seems to mostly be set up for the final installment. While some of the upcoming plot points are very obvious, as I was saying before, I'm completely baffled as to how everything is actually going to wrap up in one 400-ish page book, maybe 500 pages. It sounds like a lot, but it is not for a fantasy finale. That being said, even though I'm talking about all of the kind of bonkers developments in the plot, it's actually not that complex of a fantasy world. This is definitely a fantasy series that focuses more on keeping the plot progressing and the reader engaged than any really complex, nuanced machinations or anything like that, which made it really easy to follow and get engaged with. It was honestly really nice to read a fantasy book that really didn't strain your brain to read it. I had this fun fantasy times without needing to think too critically, which honestly I really needed in early May. I gave this one 4 stars and am hoping to finally finish this series in June. Fingers crossed that it will actually happen, because I've been reading this series for a really long time now. I think I took like a 2-year hiatus in the middle, so let's just get it over with. After that was Jumpnauts by Hao Jingfang and translated by Ken Liu. Just when I thought I'd moved on from Ken Liu in April, the title page smacked me in the face with his name once again. Unfortunately for me, this time he did me wrong. If you're following the pattern of these books, you'll know that this one was also a DNF. No, I did not plan it this way. I also am not actually, introducing it purposely in this way. This is literally just the order that I finished things. In this science fiction novel, the world is divided into 2 warring factions. When aliens with advanced technology are discovered to be approaching Earth, 3 individuals must reach and recruit them before the enemy forces do. This book and I started off on the wrong foot, because the whole premise is based on one of my biggest pet peeves, specifically that aliens are responsible for some of humanity's greatest advancements. You'll notice, specifically, humanity's non-white advancements. Look, I'm just going to say it, this premise is racist. Why are white people capable of human advancement historically, but somehow anyone who isn't? Just how could they have possibly done it? It's baffling. Sounds racist, because it is. It's especially racist because a lot of the people purporting to support this theory are like, we have no evidence. How could they have done it when there's no evidence? When in fact, there is evidence. A lot of science and archaeologists have figured out exactly how these things were done.
It makes sense. It makes logical sense how any of these things were developed.
It's almost like they don't want to listen to reason because they're racist. But anyway, setting that flawed premise that the book is based on aside, the book also reads like a cheesy, mediocre action movie. It's way more concerned with the main characters looking suave and cool over having any kind of realistic personalities. And this applies to all the characters, not just the Gary Stu main character. All the characters are stereotypes with no motivations outside of said established stereotypes. I will admit the futuristic setting seemed cool, but the author mainly used it as window dressing, so there was little to no payoff resulting from it. No explanations of how any of the science worked, it was really just there as kind of an aesthetic thing. My last point is kind of a weird one. It's just that the book is very Chinese, which is not a criticism. It's just, in my experience from the Chinese works that I have read, they have a very direct, different writing style than those often found in books from Western countries and Western cultures, which can be jarring for Western readers, or at least it is for me. I've read a number of translated Chinese works before, and I have noticed that the writing style doesn't always gel with things that I am familiar with. That being said, obviously, there are Chinese works that I have greatly enjoyed regardless, such as The 3-Body Problem, which I read last month. I did DNF this at 18%, but just because of the quantity that I did read and my confidence that it'd be an even lower rating than if I had continued reading, I did give this one a 2 stars. After that, I finished off a book that I was very excited about, The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. The Tainted Cup is a fantasy mystery about an apprentice thrust into a high-stakes murder mystery during a fraught period of great danger from powers outside the Empire's control. And oh my goodness gracious, I loved this book. This book was all about the world, and it was such a good world. This world is lush and expansive, and there's clearly so much thought put into the world that we as readers just don't know because it hasn't been pertinent to the story yet. Yet at the same time, at no point is this amount of detail actually overwhelming. Bennett does an excellent job of balancing the knowledge we as readers get to ensure we are able to follow the story but also not answer all our questions. He masterfully balances letting the reader flounder and put things together themselves with exposition to ensure we're never too bogged down. I never had trouble understanding how or why something was happening in the world in the context of the plot, outside of just the events of the book, though I did desperately want to know and understand more. One of the coolest parts of the world, I thought, was regarding the magic system, because it was less a magic system and more a science system. But that's all I'm going to say on the matter there, because I really think you just have to experience it. In regards to the murder mystery, it was quite solid. It's definitely a Holmes-Watson dynamic, and I felt like it was balanced very well. All the deductions were logical and traceable to the narrative, though there were some things that the reader can't know because that part of the world building hadn't been explained. But an equal, if not more, amount of things that happened in the plot the reader could track. I did think it was an excellent balance of deductions designed for the reader to be able to connect and feel intelligent and involved, while still having enough mystique to keep us engaged in the plot that we didn't see coming. The characters were also delightful and extremely sympathetic. I loved all of them, and you can tell there is a lot more depth to them than what we can see. And this book was really just more of an introduction to them and the world than anything else, because honestly, it is an intro. This is the first book in a series. I truly love this book, and I gave it 5 stars. I think it is by far the best fantasy book of 2024 that I've read thus far. The only reason it's not the best book of 2024 is because that honor still goes to What My Bones Know, which, honestly, I'm a little obsessed with. I then finished up Mrs. Caliban by Rachel Ingalls. This is a speculative novella about a housewife having an affair with an escaped monster man. I'm just gonna be honest, I didn't get it. For being a monster fucker book, it was much more focused on the mundanity and simple dramas of domesticity in the US. Essentially, family drama, and as I've established earlier in this video, I don't really give a shit. You're just watching this woman's life implode at no fault of her own. Like, she's just surrounded by really shitty people, and through the course of the story, she discovers how shitty they are. And that's it. That's the story. I'm pretty sure the monster man was meant to be a metaphor for race, displacement, belonging, etc. And he was by far the most interesting portion of the story, but couldn't really make up for the rest of the domestic ennui crap. I gave it 2 stars. After that was Island Rule by Katie M. Flynn. Island Rule is a short story collection about alienation, solitude, loneliness, and belonging. Or at least that's what I think it is about based on the 3 stories I read from it. It was kind of hard to tell because they legitimately all felt like I was reading the same story over and over again. Or at the very least, they all had the same kind of jaded female main character narrating each story with the same general ending and results. At no point did any of them seem to be changing or saying anything. Instead, it was just a random set of mundane and one fantastical events that don't really have any bearing on the main character at all. All I really got away from them was that the main character was wallowing and commiserating on how unfulfilling their lives are. It was difficult for me to sympathize with such an overwhelming sense of nihilism. After reading 3 of the stories, I determined that I really didn't need to read the same story 9 more times, so I DNF'd it. The next book was Rocks Fall, Everyone Dies by Lindsay Ribar? Ribar? I'm not totally sure. This young adult novel is about a boy with powers that allow him to manipulate the people around him and his growth as he learns empathy. I only really picked this one up because in high school, one of my classes read this short story where this group of people were in an avalanche and they were in a chalet, but when they found out the avalanche was coming, they all ran out of the chalet to escape from the avalanche. However, the way the avalanche shook out was it actually bypassed the cabin completely and killed all the people, so rocks fell and everyone died. I'm pretty sure the message of the story was that if they'd stayed put, they would have lived or something like that. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. I don't even remember what the story was called. But my friend and I's only takeaway was that rocks fell and everyone died. And because of that, it became an inside joke between us where we'd explain that the plot of every single piece of media that we engaged with was that rocks fell and everyone died. Obnoxious, I know. I'm fully aware how awful it was, but I was also 16, so we thought we were hilarious at the time. I have since found out that she doesn't even remember the joke. It's just me. So I have just been holding on to this memory by myself for no reason. What this meant in regards to the book, though, was I had no idea what this book was going to be about. Turns out it is a very mid-2010s book where a teenage cis hetero white boy learns other people are real and have feelings. So essentially pretty common for that time period. That being said, it wasn't poorly written or anything, and I did enjoy it while I was reading it. I just didn't really care past that or when I wasn't reading. The ending was the worst part of the book by far and just super lackluster. There doesn't seem to be any sort of resolution or wrap up. It just kind of ends with no closure for any of the characters, really. Overall, just extremely fine. I gave it 3 stars. And the final book of May was Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian MacAllister. In this mystery novel, a woman's son commits a crime in front of her, and she must go back in time to stop it. Honestly, this was surprisingly good. Interestingly, the main focus of the book was not actually the mystery, but instead on motherhood and the anxiety that comes with it. Specifically, anxiety regarding doing things quote-unquote right or loving your child enough, especially regarding balancing work and motherhood in a modern setting where multiple expectations weigh in from multiple sides, people constantly saying you're not working hard enough, but you're also not being a good enough or present enough mother, and trying to balance that all both in reality and mentally. I legitimately thought it was done well enough that even someone with no kids could empathize with the struggle the main character was experiencing. One thing I especially appreciated was the support network the main character had while she was grappling with all these issues. She very clearly was surrounded by people who loved and cared for her, which was such a refreshing change of pace from most of the thrillers that I've read. The only censure or antagonism she ever encounters is self-inflicted and felt more accurate to life since most of the time we are our own biggest critics. Her relatability made the story much more powerful and engaging than if she hadn't been so relatable. The mystery was also pretty interesting, the plot was pretty predictable, and the twist was pretty obvious, but at no point did it really take away from the story since the main focus was on the main character's growth as opposed to the mystery itself, although obviously the mystery did have a prevalent role. It just wasn't the main thing this book was written for. I really like this, and I kind of wish that more thrillers were like this and had kind of more human elements to them. I gave this one a 3.5 stars. The only other books I read this month were a continuation of my Full Metal Alchemist read-through. So this month I read books 6 and 7. The story's really starting to pick up. It's starting to get to the point where I don't remember as much of the little details, so it's becoming a lot more engaging and kind of more difficult to put these down. I tend to try to read these as like a chapter here, a chapter there, like on a lazy morning kind of thing, but lately I've been having to force myself to put it down and not just read through the entire volume. So we'll see how quickly I go through the rest of the series. Other than that, that's all the books that I read in May. In regards to stats, I read a total of 10 books this month and DNF'd 5. I think that is a record for me for this year. I DNF'd a lot of books this month, but it was worth it, I think, in the long run. 4 of the books that I read were owned, and 6 of them were from the library. I'm pretty happy with this breakdown. I feel like I'm getting through a decent amount of owned books and hopefully whittling down my own TPR. I am pretty happy with this ratio, so I'm going to try to keep it up moving forward, but we'll see. Things happen. You never know. As far as genre goes, this was definitely a fantasy-heavy month. It was my birthday month, so I kind of gave in to my desire to just read as much fantasy as I could, and I succeeded quite well. But it doesn't mean that I didn't read pretty much anything else. 1 mystery and 1 lit fic. Fantasy was definitely the bulk of this month. Ratings were also across the board. I did include a couple DNF ratings, which is why I think those lower numbers are skewing there. But otherwise, everything else I read was quite good. So we have 1 or 1.5 star, 2 2-star, 1 2.5 star, 0 3 stars. I think I said 0 3 stars because I was waffling between Rocks Fall Everyone Dies being a 2.5 and a 3. So I decided on a 3, but I had already written these stats and I'm too lazy to change them. So it's marked here as a 2.5, but it's actually a 3. 2 3.5 stars, 3 4 and 4.5 stars, and 1 5. Going into June, I am currently reading Cast, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. This is my nonfiction for May. I am like 50 pages from the end, but I haven't finished it yet, so that's really annoying, but I'm gonna easily catch up, I think, in June. How to Solve Your Own Murder by Kristen Perrin. A Fatal Illusion by Annalee Huber. I believe this is book 11 in the Lady Darby mystery series. And The Red House Mysteries by A.A. Milne, who surprisingly is the same author as Winnie the Pooh, which I wasn't expecting. And I can finally say that Leviathan Wakes has come back from the library. So my partner and I are continuing with our audiobook read through. I'm really praying that we'll be able to wrap it up in June because I don't know if I can wait again when this library hold lapses. Fingers crossed, pray for me. I'm gonna get this done. Crafting for this month was really only sewing and cross stitch. For cross stitch, I'm still working on the same piece that I was working on last month. It's that Cloudy Sunset piece by Jubilee. So it is still slow going, but I do have the bulk of the sky done now, and I'm finally getting to the little interesting parts in the cloud. So that part is going to be a lot more interesting to do. I just have to finish getting the rest of this bulk of solid color out of the way, but I'm almost there. I'm so close. For sewing, I did make this dress. Please don't mind the fit of it too much. This mannequin is significantly skinnier than I am. I think it's like a show mannequin. I don't even think it's an actual dress size. It's just for like staging things for photos. I got it secondhand. I do not use it as a dress form. It doesn't fit right on this mannequin, but this is the dress that I made. It's a summer dress. After going to Mexico, I really wanted a light, airy dress, so decided why not make one. Additionally, in sewing, I became a little obsessed with the show Delicious in Dungeon on Netflix. It's an anime, and became really obsessed with the idea of cosplaying Marcille. However, felt kind of weird cosplaying as just her base character design, especially because I know that there's going to be a ton of people doing that. So I came up with the idea of kind of creating a Victorian version of her, and that thought has just completely monopolized all my thoughts. So I came up with this design, and I'm working towards creating a cosplay for it. At the moment, I'm still toying with the idea of potentially having it ready by Comic-Con, which I think is in late July, which is a lot. I don't know if I'll actually be able to do it, but I'm trying. We'll see. I'm trying not to rush and stress myself out. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, but I'm gonna move forward nonetheless. At this point, all I have is this bum pad, which is the kind of structural garment that goes underneath the skirt to create that kind of artificial bump that a lot of Victorians had. It is ugly as hell. It's the first one I've ever made, so don't judge me too much. I've never worked with batting before, but this is what we have so far. So I'm gonna work on the corset next. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, stay tuned. We'll find out together how awful this is gonna be, but I'm gonna have fun making it regardless, so whatever. And that is everything for the month of May. I don't have anything else to discuss. Thank you very much for staying tuned this long, and I hope to see you next month for my June wrap up. Bye!